Session 4, panel discussion on the topic risk management and value protection. May I now invite the moderator of the session, Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti, to take his place on the dais. I now invite the distinguished panelists, Mr. H.V. Harish, Managing Partner, eCube Investments Advisors Private Limited, Mr. Sachin Paransme, Partner, Deloitte, and Mr. Vijayendran, Head PMS, Sundaram Mutual Fund and Director CEO, Sundaram Alternate Assets Limited. Can we welcome them with a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Harish is a Managing Partner, eCube Investments Advisors. He has over 30 years of experience in consulting, corporate governance, corporate finance, investment banking, and strategy. He has a wide range of experience in private and public sectors, covering a wide range of sectors, including technology, real estate, hospitality, pharmaceuticals, engineering, petrochemicals, and many more. And he's also he's been the past president of Bangalore Chamber of Commerce and Industry, founder member and on board of governance of Center for Sustainable Development. Mr. Sachin Paranspe is a partner with Deloitte. He has over 25 years of experience in business advisory and industry. His area of specialization is corporate governance, strategic risk, and internal controls. He advises a number of clients on building risk-intelligent enterprises. His clients include multinational companies, large Indian corporates, PSUs, and he leads strategic risk practice for Deloitte in India and Asia Pacific leader for corporate governance services. Mr. Vijayendran is a Chief Executive Officer and Director of Sundaram Alternates. He also oversees the international business undertakings of Sundaram Asset Management Limited, Asset Management Singapore, and is also the Director of Sundaram Asset Management Singapore. And he has over 30 plus years of experience in the Indian financial services industry. He was also the head of Sundaram Mutual Portfolio Managers, the portfolio management service of Sundaram Asset Management Company. So that's the dignitaries for this final session on risk management and value protection. I hand over the session to the moderator, Mr. Shailesh.
Thank you very much. What a fantastic panel we have today. Thank you, all of you, for joining this panel. Let me start with a story from a Bollywood film which is to be made. The story is surrounding Shah Rukh Khan as a young college-going person. He's got a girlfriend who has been stuck in China, and she's been diagnosed with coronavirus. So she's in a hospital in China. And he's absolutely at his wit's end, doesn't know what to do. So he goes to a Baba, and the Baba gives him a pudi, which is simply, he understands it as Hindustan ki mitti. So he takes that pudi and he's wondering how to get to China. So many difficulties. There are visa restrictions, no entry, hospital is completely cordoned off. There's nothing he can do. There's a villain who's trying to make sure that she gets not Hindustan but Pakistan ki mitti. So he is absolutely not able to do much. And how he finally solves this issue is the rest of the story. And the name of the movie is Corona Pyar Hai. So, that's the biggest risk today the world seems to be facing is the coronavirus. But risk has always two dimensions to it. And I want to have one of the panelists take on coronavirus as the opposite of a risk. Is there any taker on that?
Let me try.
Okay.
Well, I think, yes, coronavirus is something that is bothering a lot of us, and it is going to impact a lot of businesses. But there is also multiple other businesses which should benefit from that. If you're a maker of sanitizers, if you're a maker of masks. And I see one other maybe benefit to India, that hopefully because of this, we will learn more hygiene and learn to keep our selves disinfected. So that could be a collateral benefit. But for every business which suffers, there's somebody else who could potentially, if you're I'm sorry to be using grave humor, but if you are a grave digger, this is opportunity for you. So there is always an opportunity, and if you are in a business which is directly impacted by Corona, you learn how to tighten your belts. You've lived through something which is difficult, and you'll come out stronger. You'll come out stronger at the end of it. How did I manage something which was as difficult to me? So, you know, they say that, you know, a ship, again, in today's cruise ship world, that may not make appropriate sense, but a ship is safest in the harbor, but that is not what a ship is meant to do.
But, you know, maybe it's worth spending a couple of minutes on what action the world has taken on battling this great risk. Maybe there are great lessons there. Some companies actually went out and ordered their critical supplies way in advance. The good news is that 192 containers have just landed in Mumbai port from China after all the fumigation and all the situations that they had to go through. So the discipline in China has forced their people to actually go back and work even under these conditions with far less manpower, far greater automation. They've started loading the ships, and the ships have set sail. It is an amazing story of how nations can react to adverse situations. Take the example of Singapore. The Prime Minister went on public television to talk about all the steps that the country has taken to protect its citizens. He was so transparent, so honest. Anybody who has a chance to view that video, please take a look at it. It is an example of what leadership can do to mitigate risk, even in a crisis like the Black Swan event the coronavirus was. Israelis have already discovered the vaccine. It is, as we speak, getting tested. In 10 weeks' time, they're fast-tracking the trials. So we should have an antidote to the coronavirus, which can be human injectable within 10 weeks. So that's the pace at which the world seems to be working on this whole risk getting mitigated. In fact, many companies have now started naming their risk committees, risk and opportunities committee. And I think this is the new way that boards and all of us should start thinking about risk. I want to make another provocative statement, that we never track how we solved risks in the past. Is that something that is acceptable?
No, actually, the first point on the business, you look at risk and business together. So I come from the asset management side. Actually, the business has embedded with the risk. Actually, if you look at the investment risk or the operations risk, the business itself is embedded actually. If you look at from a regulatory perspective, which SEBI governs us on the asset management side, there are certain minimum things we need to do which takes care of a certain amount of risk containment. But having said that, business itself comes with a risk. Today, I tell you, like in the asset management side, the Black Swan event of coronavirus, what you can do, I mean, I can really raise some cash to prevent the fall in the NAV of our funds, but how much cash you can really create. And mind you, this last couple of years, I've been in the industry for almost 33, 34 years, but I'm seeing the last 5 to 6, 7 years possibly, or even 10 years, the volatility in the market has been going up consistently, whichever markets, developed markets, emerging markets, you name it. And different asset classes, be it Forex or be it in equity, debt, whatever. We call it fixed income actually in India. Just to tell you, the fixed income, people say everything is fixed, so you get an interest, you have a retirement plan, well, you invest in the fixed income. The last 1 year, you see the risk, how it has played out the fixed income market is no longer a fixed income market. You better say it as a debt market, and it has its own risk. To me, honestly, the business, as you said correctly, business comes with the risk, and we need to do business and live with the risk. Not that you should push the risk aside or it's an ad hoc thing, no way. But risk is embedded like part of the business, and you need to control how to control. That's the key thing we do. So in this process, actually, as I represent Sundaram Asset Management, we were one of the early people to get into the asset management way back in 96. And very early, I've been in the company from that time. And around 98 or 2000, we created a dedicated risk team. And we continue to do that. We have an enterprise risk management. And we have developed, initially we used to keep the events tracking the various risks which happens in the market or the operation side. We used to keep it with the Excel. And later we realized it was becoming too many variables to control through an Excel. So we developed our own in-house risk tracker. Today, I can say that we have developed scenarios of the past and how we mitigated those past systems. But it keeps changing. Technology, regulations, and then newer business systems comes out. So what you mitigated last time, the same risk is coming back in a different method. So I tell you an example like.
But do you have a registry?
Yeah, we have a repository,
Wonderful.
registry, which really tracks the past scenarios. Like as a fund manager, I go back and see the cycles where last time as an inflation, interest rates, how did the market react? Same way, we also see the past events, how did we mitigate those events? But this is something very, very difficult to manage it. I tell you an example, 5 years back, if an investor wants to come online and invest, he can use the application apps of our own apps or our transfer registrar apps, or he can use our web system to come and buy into our mutual funds. But today, so we had some risk in that. So we mitigated that, planned the risk methodology or whatever. We mitigated the risk and controlled it and ran it very well. But now the last couple of years, I have multiple providers who come with the mutual fund apps, right? So the same risk is coming back, and I need to create further methodology to mitigate the risk because of the change in technology and business. So there is nothing like one risk I have completely removed and it won't come back. It just, the change in technology and the regulations brings back the similar risk. So you need to be on it continuously. You need to track, you need to have a tracker.
You know, what you say is so appropriate. The VIX index is at its highest. Today it just crashed through the ceiling because the market just couldn't accept the volatility. But look at the strange thing that is happening in the world. 1/4 of the world's debt is quoting at negative interest rates. So the highest risk is no longer in equity. The bigger risk has moved to debt. The mitigator of the debt risk has become equity, because at least you have a chance of making over a longer period of time a little bit of profit. I mean, I won't count the fluctuations in the markets today. Today is a crazy, very, very unusual day with 971 points lost on the Sensex. But it's sorry? Yeah, very true. But the point is that the entire focus of risk keeps shifting. And therefore, there is continuous need to discover new risks. Sachin, what do you think? Are you discovering new risks on everyday basis?
Absolutely. So I'll answer, I'll take liberty of answering your earlier question.
Sure.
And also talk about the discovery of risks and how late those discoveries happen. Right? So one is, as you mentioned, companies have the repository or risk libraries that they actually call. I see the movement in that direction. So the answer is yes and no. Companies have started keeping some historical record of the risks that they faced. But a lot of times you go below level 1 and A lot of times you go a level below the risk definition and you get no information. So what was the talent or attrition risk that is there on the list 5 years ago? Attrition as a risk will remain. What was the cause? How was it dealt with? How successful were we? What was the institutional knowledge? What is going to be same? What is going to be different this time? All that is in somebody's head. So while the repository may exist, how the company dealt with it does not exist. Or if it exists only in people's mind. So not really, institutionalized in that sense.
Say is so true. Risk management has moved totally as the responsibility of the CEO. No longer is risk management the remit of the finance controller. No longer is it a job of somebody who only understands numbers and finance. It has become an organization-wide strategic matter. And wherever I serve on a risk committee, I mandate that it has to be the CEO who actually anchors the whole process of pooling talent, bringing people together, bringing all the disparate parts of the organization together, think about it in terms of a framework. More important is the migration of risk. Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? What rate at which it is changing? All of these have become absolutely important. But very critical is the documentation.
Is documentation, yes.
So that if you want to refer back and think about how you dealt with the same thing in the past and you want to learn from it, you just need it.
Yeah, see, actually, I just have a point where the risk is like historically, there is a risk department which will handle the risk, and all of us contribute to the creation of risk for whatever reason. So, in fact, in our own teams, we see that each one of us create risk every day, knowingly, unknowingly. For example, I was telling Sailesh Bhai that if one of my colleagues has to send a critical mail to some XYZ and he stops copying or by mistake forgets to copy the critical guy, and he is creating a risk actually in that matter because that is going to spiral off for some reason, something else. So we do, like at the operation level, at the business level, at the investment level, we do create risk. So we internally at Sundaram, we have a clear thought process where the risk has, as a team, directly reports to the CEO, plus it can go up to the board, and we have an internal risk committee which deliberates, which has the functional heads of various teams who participate as part of the committee. And actually, it's very difficult to manage risk and control because the dynamics are changing. So you need to encourage people at various departments to throw up the type of risk they see. They don't understand knowingly that's a risk, but they do come out with instances where things go wrong. And if you look at the way the instances go wrong, it's a certain pattern of a risk being created, and we try to prevent that. But having said that, you live with that as part of the business, but you keep continuously at it, and the repository really helps us to go back and see how the situation we have handled or how we have mitigated, tried to mitigate.
Fantastic. That must be an industry best practice. But
yeah, I just thought I will create some. So I think, the problem with discussing risk too much is we don't want everybody to become risk averse. And, every organization has a certain risk appetite. Some may be willing to take a higher risk, some may be. So there is no one silver bullet that, this is the gold standard for risk management, everybody got to follow it. I may have a risk appetite which is different from his. My organization may want to take higher level of risk or lower level of risk. And what is important is you need to be agile, because the risks we saw yesterday is useful to know, but tomorrow the risks are completely different. We live in a very dynamic world. So agility, agile governance around risk is very critical. But at the same time, create a culture where you're not talking of risk all the time, that people say, let's not do anything. It's an issue in certain organizations that let's be bureaucratic, pass the buck. nobody's going to
Don't do anything.
Don't do anything.
Nobody can question
So
you.
I think that is very important. And since we are the last session of the day, we don't want people to go back saying, let's avoid risk management.
Vajpayee Saab wants to weigh in on risk. It's such a exciting subject. जरा एक mic देना सबको.
Well, I want to sort of make an observation and then seek an answer, maybe from the panel. Action and reaction. You do some action, and the normal feature of that action is expected reaction.
Correct.
And if that doesn't happen, it becomes a risk. Do I understand correctly? No?
Yeah.
All right. And therefore, let me group the 4 things that affect the action becoming a reaction. And they are political, social, economic, and environment now. Now, when all these 4 factors move into a direction, then they create a kind of fusion. And if the fusion happens in the expected lines, there is no risk. If the fusion doesn't happen on the expected line, it becomes a risk. Now let us put these 4 groups differently. The political, and before I say that, let me introduce another part of it. Howsoever small a unit may be, including an individual, today is influenced by whatever is happening anywhere, in any part, not only on the planet Earth,
Yeah.
but even outside the planet Earth.
Absolutely right.
Having said that, now I've just done for the sake of discussion, otherwise I can go on relating what more factors can come. Now just think these 4 particular dominant factors which act and react and create a fusion doesn't happen. Now if all these 4 are moving in a very dynamic directions, which are not synchronized, so how does one understand what kind of risks are there? Whether categorization, I'll finish in a minute. Categorization and learning from the experience, will it be all right? Now another factor which should be added, which when globally all the risk management scientists are not adding yet, is a technology risk. Now all these factors, if they create, what is an answer to that? You may be watching all the economic risks, but are you also watching what sociological changes are taking place and what kind of reaction it will have on the businesses? Are you also taking place what Greta Thunberg is trying to say to the world? Are you saying if there are going to be commercial passengers going onto the Mars, what are going to be the risks? And if we have, and if it's not something that will happen tomorrow. And with that, I would like the panel to look at that way of.
Let me try and respond.
Talk about
But actually, you've put a finger on something that, if you look at the World Economic Forum risk report that was released a month ago, if you really look at it, there are trends that they talk in the similar domains that you've talked about. And I'll just read out a few. And if you really ask me, there are risks to be discovered in these domains which I don't think companies do enough of. France, Chile, and Hong Kong, all the 3 are experiencing contraction of their economy. Reason? Social unrest. Not economic. Social unrest. One of the fundamental reasons of social unrest, which is not talked very often, is the inequality, the disparity of income. And the same report goes on to say that in 1980s, the average ratio of a CEO salary to an employee salary was 1:20 or 20:1. Any guesses what that ratio is today? 1:300. 1:300. What it means is that, obviously the richer people have grown richer and poorer people haven't really done well. There is a Gini index that the World Bank releases, and that's a good indication, and Hong Kong is amongst the worst of the countries when it comes to that index. These are all the trends that one can spot. And see, these are the risks which relate to me as a corporate, but I am so much, running after my operational risks or my profit and financial risks that I tend to ignore these. I also tend to ignore these because these probably hit me a year from now or 3 years from now, and the horizon generally the corporates take, even when you talk of risk management, is so short term that there is no tendency to look at 3 years, 5 years, 10 years horizon. But some of these things, and then there are quite a few risk areas. So if I were to look at it, I think there are enough trends available. What we talk, in terms of risk sensing ability of an organization, which must go beyond just understanding your industry or business environment. Today, that can come from anywhere. It can come from cyber. It can come from, deep sociological imbalances. It can come from geopolitical, anywhere. And risk management cannot now restrict to what the known risks, the industry risks, the product risk. And unless there is an investment in understanding where could those risks come from, I think we will not do a good job of knowing or saying that I know my risks and I know how to deal with it.
Fantastic, Sachin. You pointed out the World Economic Forum risk, the top risks, the top 5 risks, as you pointed out a little while ago in our connection on WhatsApp, are all related to environment and climate change. And everything that we are doing or not doing today from a risk point of view is moving to mitigate that risk. The other very fascinating thing about risk is that the frameworks are changing. At one time, we had simple risk management frameworks. Today, if you go to a very highly sophisticated GRC framework and try and bring it in, the complexity is humongous. Is there any counter view to frameworks?
Frameworks, since you asked for a counter view, make life complex, make it more data-driven, but at the same time, it becomes like the specialist you don't understand. And you say, here's the specialist, this framework he's applying, it's beyond, it's going over the top. So simplify it for me. I understand climate is a risk. What are we doing about it? So, some of these frameworks go so complex. Even if you look at that WIF report, the 10 top risks, I can understand those, how it moved over the 10 years. But there are charts there with trees. It's going all over the place. And beyond the point, we have to, if I start thinking of all of that, I say best is to go jump into the well, right? They're saying Bombay will be under the sea, they're saying, something else. So, I think sometimes we can get overwhelmed with risk that you might say, to hell with all this.
So any scenarios that tell us that there is far greater opportunity, particularly what Vajpayee Sahib referred to, technology. What are the big opportunities that technology has thrown up? I think there is so much happening which can transform even simple things like agriculture in India. Just think about it. If you can, instead of having half of India's land mass given up to agriculture, if you can have 1/2 of it growing plants without soil, soilless agriculture, with the minimal use of water, drip irrigation. Israel uses 1/10, less than 1/10 of the water per unit of crop. These are the big opportunities that are sitting there, low-hanging fruit, which India can actually pluck. So risk now is beginning to be seen at a national level, at a corporate level, at an individual level, at every level. And then the organization pulls it in and creates the right way to make people feel empowered, as you rightly said. Nobody wants to sort of feel that we are so stuck that there's nothing more we can do. A very interesting question that has come up from Mr. Jayaraman is, and it is to the whole panel, so whoever wishes to take it can take it, that with the growing role of AI, what is going to happen to the young generation which may not have a 9 to 5 job to do, because all that they can do on a routine basis is being taken up by machines. So is there a role for the human being? Is that something that corporates are rushing in to extract the productivity value? What is the future for such youngsters?
Well, let me start with one clarification. I think there is a misnomer going around called artificial intelligence. Okay. Artificial intelligence is nowhere near even probably 0.02% or 0.005% of what our brain can do. For some reason, it got named as artificial intelligence, and we all somehow think here there's an intelligent creature. So that is clarification one. Two is, I think, if you look at human history, this having a 9 to 5 job is probably 100 years, 200 years. We've lived for thousands of years without having a 9 to 5 job. We've managed, so we will find solutions. There will be opportunities, there will be risks. I'll just give a very simple example. 20 years ago, before the advent of mobile phones, there were probably more than 1 crore STD booths in this country. It's all gone. Now, did we say, let's drop mobile phones because the STD booths and the entrepreneurs, I mean, all of us have stood in lines in different cities to do that. So technology will find a solution. If you go back even further, there were people who were in agriculture and there were people who were making clothes for them. That's it. Then the tailoring machine came, and, we'll find solutions. Yes, there will be disruptions, there will be pain. Every change has that. So first, let's forget the word artificial intelligence. I prefer the word machine learning. There are machines which can learn and do something better, but nowhere near artificial intelligence.
Actually, there's an interesting thing I was reading last week. This is quote unquote, using artificial intelligence data analysis. Very interesting that somebody, this is not a cyber thing, but very interesting is somebody was tracking using the technology, AI and so on, who is hiring small private jets in US, and what these private jets, where they are flying, somebody is tracking. And they found one of the private jet they're tracking, it landed at Omaha airport. And from there, few of the top guys got down, and they tracked that also later. And they found they landed in Berkshire Hathaway's Warren Buffett's house, or whatever office. And they found that these guys are Occidental Petroleum, quote unquote. This is the company. And the next 10 days, the news was Warren Buffett invested $10 billion in that petroleum, Occidental Petroleum company. Yeah. Again, using, this is I'm sorry, this is not a regulatory thing, but I'm saying how people are using, and it needs people. They need to analyze, not just that artificial intelligence is going to give you. I'm just giving you an interesting thing which I read a couple of days back, how people, the industry is moving towards technology, combining the data, how people can put to use. And this is amazing extent people can go to. So, right. So, same thing, like for example, 5 years back or 10 years back, we were all going to a bank branch to do transactions. Now hardly we go. I don't go to my branch. It's been ages since I've been there. So whatever it is, it's become walk of life. Not many people have lost their jobs. People have extended the banking branches or whatever. Yeah.
And I'm deliberately, I'm sure you forgive me, facing the audience now. The economic order of the planet Earth has been changing. The first was what is called hunting and gathering economy, which employed the human race for millions of years. And then suddenly this economy went somewhere else, agriculture economy came. And that worked for 10,000 years. Then those who were engaged in agriculture, they became redundant. Then came the industrial economy, which operated for 200 years. And has come the information economy, which is going to last for 75 years. Shailesh Bhai is talking about agriculture without seeds and water and soil. This is called a biotechnology economy, which is, you will see in the next 25 years, the dominant economic output will not be created by information economy, but by the biotechnology. And there is another economy which I can see in the horizon, and that is the cosmic economy. Now, what happens when an economic order changes? People don't go out of job. They start doing different things. So this is what will happen. I'm very optimistic about the human race.
Great vote of confidence. But let me share with you a story I heard last night. Very fascinating story. This was narrated to us by Stephen Schwarzenegger, the chairman of Blackstone, who's visiting India right now. So his friend is Masayoshi Son of SoftBank. So the belief of Mr. Son is that there will be a time where every human being will have a coupled AI robot. Every human being. And there will be what he's calling a brain-computer interface. So the power of every human being to actually be productive will be exponentially increased because there is this BCI with a individualized robot, which he believes will be 1:1. So his business strategy is that anybody who has an idea which can go from concept to IPO, I will invest in it fully. That's why he went and invested in, as we know, in Oyo, and he invested in many other companies which I don't want to name, have gone more or less bust. So his business model didn't work, but his strategy was clean. And he believes, and many people believe this, that this BCI is what's going to raise human productivity to unknown levels. So that's another story that you keep in mind. People will sort of interface with a robo and together get more productive.
So just on that, I think, and if you really look at the history, no revolution has resulted into loss of jobs. At a broader level, it has only created more jobs. But I would think that at an individual level, one has to be paranoid. Because, and there's a classic, theory that we use in innovation, for example, that if you have a drill machine, and if the company believes or the worker believes that my job is to sell a drill machine, without realizing the drill machine's job is to drill a hole. There may be 20 different ways of drilling a hole, and the need is to drill a hole, not drilling machine. If you realize that you're either creating a need or satisfying a need, the drill machine is just a tool. The tool can change, and if the tool changes, I need to reskill myself. The moment you think about it in that direction, AI, ML, any of these new technologies are only going to help us create more jobs. We just need to be, in sync with those changes. So that's the way I look at it.
And I think we should stop using the word job. It's work. Because you can do it anytime, from anywhere. This whole idea of going into an office and moving from home, it's all switching to co-living, co-working, working from anywhere, working from any device. So it's all up for change. But he's so right. Each individual will have to unlearn and relearn. So the biggest education challenge of the world today is to re-educate all of us who have become obsolete. So that's the big challenge, biggest risk. There's another wonderful question. There are so many standards to support the organization to manage risk. ISO 9000 to 15. What do you think, if we implement all these standards, will this support organization to reduce risk and increase the opportunity? Great question. Mr. Surmeet from Omnex is asking this question. So, anybody?
I'll go with it. And this is related to the earlier point on frameworks. The way I see it is, frameworks by definition are like structures, right? Every building has a structure, has pillars and columns. That's not sufficient for you to live in. We will not live in a building which only has pillars and columns. But we will also not live where the pillars and columns are not strong or don't exist. To me, a risk management framework or standard is that structure which needs to exist, but it's a necessary but not sufficient condition. Just having framework, just having following certain standards does not mean that your risks are taken care of. It only gives a guideline, just the way your building has certain pillars and columns around which it can support the weight of the building. But you require walls, you require good interiors, you require a lot of, your own effort, air conditions, a lot of things that go in making it useful. So to make a risk framework useful, you've got to work on it. The 5 pillars that any of the frameworks talk about are not going to be sufficient for you to say, I have ISO or COSO, and that's about it.
Won't work. COSO is simply that, a framework. It's a kind of a line that is drawn for you to walk on, and then you can change the line. Wonderful. So now we have a little bit of time to take in questions from the floor, and then I will request each panelist to sum up their thoughts and ideas in order that we can bring the session to a close on time.
May I? We talk about quite often risk appetite, the word appetite, in the context of risk management. Now, whose appetite we are talking about? The CEO, the prime shareholder, all the stakeholders, the nebulous organization called the company, the regulators, the investor, the lenders, whose appetite? Any synthesized thought on this, please?
Anybody?
From my side, it's the investor, because he pays for me everything. So it is important that I protect and take care of the investor in terms of what his expectations are. So that's where the regulator also comes
Right
in.
to the day we discuss multiple stakeholders.
That's right. But the key thing is you exist for them. If they are not there, you're not there. So even if you look at the environment, the regulator comes in only because if I don't behave well to handle the investor, regulator says, no, look, you got to do these things minimum in order to serve the investor better. So that's the basic fundamental thing I need to do. And all I work around is to make sure I keep the investor happy. To me, honestly, he pays my fee, he pays my salary and everything. So
That's specific to investment industry.
so from my industry, I'm just saying the investor becomes the key.
Right, I'll give you a more general answer. See, when an organization is built up, it starts with a few people and then scales up. And it is a human thing. So the risk appetite is defined by the initial people, and it gets recalibrated as the organization grows. And if you're talking of the entire ecosystem of everybody who is involved in that, they are buying into that risk appetite. They are buying into that risk appetite. If I'm an employee of a company, which is, shall we say, for simplicity's sake, a high-risk organization, I know this is a high-risk organization. I'm buying a share, if I'm lending to them, I know it is a high-risk organization. So I bought into it. I priced myself appropriately or whatever it is. But it is already inbuilt. It can get recalibrated, and it does recalibrate as the size goes up. But I think it is set in the nature of the business, the nature of the people, any transitions in the team that manages, the board, everything. But
So we have a great example of what happened to a bank yesterday, today. So whose appetite the risk management team at the bank would have been catering to? One individual, the lenders, the investors, the shareholders, the employees, the customers?
Very, very good question. I mean, the answer which is given in one of the articles in one of the newspapers today is that it was the risk appetite of Mr. Rana Kapoor which led to Yes Bank going
That
very
I see as the biggest risk in risk management.
No, so you're right. To me, a risk appetite is from a, just answering the question, responsibility, it's a considered decision between the CEO and the board. CEO because, finally, it's not the board that takes and manages risks. But board needs to make sure that there are no unnecessary risks taken by, and particularly I don't even call it, I want to call a management, it is CEO. So it is a CEO and a considered decision finally by the board.
Absolutely. Yes.
So what kind of correlation do we see between innovation and risk? The reason why I'm asking is because of the extent of disruption which is happening today. Do Indian companies necessarily focus on the level of disruption which happens and how it impacts to conduct business and create value going forward? We have got examples like Kodak, which suddenly shut down because digital cameras came into being. So market leaders suddenly become
Zero.
They're on the streets. So
No, I think I'll take that simply from a board perspective, and then I'll sort of have other perspectives. From a board perspective, disruption is very much on the agenda of every board. There's no board that I sit on where disruption is not discussed. Give you a very extreme example. Lafarge Holcim, the largest cement company on earth, is thinking of 25 years from today when there will not be any need to make any fresh cement, because all the building materials that you need will come up from buildings which will systematically be harvested, so to speak, for the material that is embedded in it, because it's run its life. Now, that is an extreme example of disrupting before the disruption happens. So you got to take a view. There are only two positions any board can take. You either are a sitting duck and will get disrupted, like Kodak did, or like Oyo Rooms is in danger of getting disrupted because they didn't take timely action on many counts. Or you can be a disruptor, where you will go out and actually make things happen. You'll disrupt yourself in order that you can gain a competitive advantage. So it's your position, your strategic thinking, the wisdom that resides in the kind of board that you have, which will make the difference for the entire organization. But I'd welcome any more perceptions, because this is a very important subject of disruption. Any other thoughts?
To my mind, innovation is actually a mitigation to a risk. Absolutely. Without innovation, you'll face more risks. What I generally see is the younger organizations have higher risk appetite because they have less to lose and more to gain. As the organization matures, the balance shifts. They have more to lose, and therefore they become more risk averse, which is also a trap. Unless you force yourself, what made you successful was risk taking. If the organization, kind of forgets that, it's on decline. So you can't ever stop taking risks. But the bigger the organization, you will typically see that they are more risk averse, or that they're perceived to be risk averse, because they have more to lose than to gain. That's the mindset that the larger organization starts getting into. Unless, as you just mentioned, there's actually a tendency to get out of the comfort zone and try to disrupt yourself.
Well, I think I'll just supplement. I think we are talking of disruption as if it's something that is happening in the last few years. It's been happening for ages. The only change is the speed has increased. So people have handled disruption in the past, the speed is there. But people have been disrupted. You look at what was there in the 1896 Dow Jones, and every year two companies would go out, some will come, and so it's a continuous process. It's part of, shall we say, evolution, that some things will go ancient and some things will go, no? The speed is the only thing which probably has changed.
No, see, look at it. Risk to me is always an opportunity to somebody else.
Absolutely.
That's how, at least in the business context, that's how it is.
Yes, sir. You had a question. Can you speak loudly? Yeah.
So it was quite interesting. We have been discussing about the sustainability, and we have been, right from the morning, we have been hearing about the environment and so many things. He started off with agricultural economy, then some, information economy, and so many things are happening. So today, when can we talk about the environmental economy, sir?
Which economy? Environmental. Well, we'll let Bajpai Sahab answer because you pointed out the question to him.
Good. See, why I use these agriculture information or industrial revolution, this kind of economic order. Environment is not an economic order. And remember one thing, even though hunting and gathering economy is absolutely very little, it does exist even today. Hunting is an industry, permitted hunting. Similarly, agriculture economy's contribution to the overall GDP of the planet Earth is going down, but it exists. Similarly, neither industrial production has gone. But today, the greater amount of output which is being created by information economy. Now, why I use what I was saying, biological technology, that is from the drainage, they will pick up the materials and save the ecology and create what you need the things. This can happen only via the biotechnology economy. I don't want to describe you because I've done a bit of study. I'm a student of economics, so I keep thinking what is the next order that is in the offing. In fact, this was a question asked by me in a university where I had gone for a lecture. After I walked and I had talked about the bioeconomy, she said, but what is beyond bioeconomy? And I just off the cuff said, and that was about 20 years ago, that it's going to be cosmic economy. Now, when commercial investments start happening in the economy, now therefore, what will happen, that environment itself will play a role that will give lead to the cosmic economy. People will start moving beyond the planet Earth when it becomes unlivable, no? And that is what will higher amount of GDP. Then the technology will be an aid. Like industrial is an age, like agriculture is an age. For example, you eat particular food because you want to live, you want to be healthy. But if there can be an alternative element by the biotechnology, that you don't need to eat 3 meals a day out of the food that you eat. I mean, I'm sure you are aware that they are going to have vegetarian meat now.
Yep.
Because they are spoiling the ecology. Now, this is, how it is happening? Biotechnology. It's all biotechnology. So all that I wanted to mention to you is that environment is an element in the economics growth. But it is not going to be an economy by itself.
Absolutely.
I don't know whether I have answered that question.
Perfect. But let me give you two
and also,
big...
And just another thing which I think mentioned very rightly, when an economic order changes, there's a disruption. But that disruption was very slow. Now, disruption is a part of life. All that you have to note is the speed of new disruptions coming in. And when the disruption happens, there is a transitional time when you adjust to the new. And that is when the real pain starts.
Absolutely.
It's the ability of the society to be able to manage that pain, and that will depend from the various geographies.
So, I mean, to put it a little differently, there are multiple technologies. So it's not as if only individual technologies are speeding up, but they are converging. So the idea of vegetarian meat comes from DNA extraction, and from there going into 3D printing and making sure that you'll have drone delivery of meat and So therefore, everything will be automated in a way that these converged technologies will mitigate risk. But two of the richest people on earth, I just want to share how they are thinking. Jeff Bezos had a childhood fantasy that there will be the need for a different place to live in. So every year, without fail, he puts away $2 billion to make sure that the earth gets ready to send large contingents of the human race to other planets. He is spending $2 billion as we speak every year to facilitate this kind of risk mitigation, that if the earth becomes too difficult. And let me also tell you that there will be a time when there will be no need for any fossil fuels at all. And that's the world towards which almost every nation on earth is thinking of working towards. First time in the history of India, finance minister talks about shutting down bozo, old world thermal power plants. Never heard it before. This was the first time that that happened. So there is huge risk mitigation happening, as Anjani was saying, at all levels, in the minds of the government and all the way down. So it's a very fascinating new world. That's, Sachin, you wanted to add? Because
I just wanted to add one point to the one that you talked about, Jeff Bezos. I don't know, if you've read, if you've heard this, but he's seriously looking at setting up a factory beyond Earth's atmosphere.
correct.
Reason being, there are no land permissions required. Yeah. There is no gravity. You can actually be far more efficient to work there. The entire beyond Earth's atmosphere, it is extremely resource rich. So what you're getting here, which Earth is getting depleted of your natural resources, are abundantly available.
Absolutely.
The day he or anybody cracks that code, you can't even imagine what will happen. A factory outside the Earth's atmosphere.
The other
shipping these goods back to humans here.
So our daily commute will look
The
different.
other crazy guy who's thinking like that is Elon Musk.
Elon Musk.
These are the stories which I've been reading. I've been encouraging me to think that cosmic economy is on the horizon.
Yes.
Absolutely, sir.
So I was just telling you, Sachin, the daily commute will be different. Instead of the traffic will
But there was one last question there, sir. You had a question there? Thank you. So, can we spend the last 3-4 minutes for each of our panelists to provide 2 key takeaways from... So what we did was we didn't have a formal panel discussion. We had a conversation with all of you. And that's how we had planned it, that we don't want any structured presentations. We want to have a conversation. And I think I enjoyed it very much because it's conversations which make the world go round. But if there are 2 sharp takeaways that you want to leave behind, what would they be? Harish?
well, I think don't overstress on risk. It's not going to solve the problem. Look for opportunities is my number 1 takeaway. 2 is, I think we are in a world of rapid change and we have to keep on adapting as we go along. There is no silver bullet, and 6 months ago we didn't know what was Corona. 6 months later we don't know what else will come in. So life has to go on. Have fun.
Yeah, in our industry, just come from my perspective of asset management all the time. Basically, 20 years back, we had more fund managers, less risk officers. Today, it's the reverse. But that doesn't mean that business is not important. Business is very key. Business has to grow. And risk is also as important because the business goes through various changes, technology, regulation, and legal, so on, and people dynamics. So the behavioral part of the people. So all this put together, you need to grow the business, but you need to have a strong framework of risk management so that they coexist and manage the business. That's the key, actually.
The title of this session was Risk Management and Value Protection. I think my one message is, I think we should not just stop at value protection, but also include value creation. So that's the message number one, or thinking that I have. The second is on this topic of frameworks and standards. I would just leave you with 3 words, and then I look at the entire risk framework in those 3 words. Where are the risks? Risks are self-inflicted, risks are imposed, and risks are calculated. The better you deal with the self-inflicted risks, the more time you have to deal with or take calculated risks. So self-inflicted, imposed, and calculated is how, if you look at map mentally risks in these 3 buckets, I think that's the simplest of the framework that I would want to just leave you with.
Fabulous. For me, the only takeaway I'd like you to get is that feel free to innovate. The world is abundant. Keep your minds open. Nobody's going to take away everybody's job. Things are going to get better. And stay that way, because the other side of the coin of risk is opportunity. So keep having fun, as Harish says. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the dignitaries. May I now request Mr. Anjani Agarwal to kindly come onto the stage and present mementos to the moderator, to the distinguished panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the national anthem.
गणमन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे